And done. Oh, that was really interesting and informative. Um, Welcome to Tuesday here. I promised I would make a video that talked a little bit about the rubric itself because there's a lot of questions about what's required and what's expected of you on that DBQ rubric. So I took some screenshots of it and I made some annotations here, and I want to talk about each one of those to clarify some of these issues. But first, I want to make one general statement that might help to alleviate some of that, and that is this: more is more. If you are striving to do the least amount as possible, you're not going to do well on the exam. The more information you can share, the more analysis you can give, the more contextualization, all of it, more and more and more, the better it will be. Mr. DeSantis always says, and it's kind of disgusting, but it's true, that he wants you to puke on the page. The College Boards want you to take everything that you have inside you and just get it out. So if you notice on the document, for instance, it talks about only giving 2 pieces of evidence beyond the document. Why would you give 2 when you can give more? So I want to talk specifically about that when we look at the rubric itself from the horse's mouth. So let's take a look at it. So here it is, the 2020 APUSH history rubric for the DBQ. I did a little annotation here, and you'll notice it's quite simple, and that is the beginning, the intro paragraph. This first part, parts A and B, both the thesis and the contextualization, are exactly the same as the LEQ and is exactly the same as the DBQ would normally be in other years. I believe, and it's my personal opinion, that contextualization just makes sense to go first, and then your thesis next. I would do it that way, but there's no rules to say that you have to. The most important thing I would include here is this idea of the 3 reasoning statements, where under the thesis portion, where it says it has to respond to the prompt other than restating or rephrasing the prompt. To me, if you don't give a few reasoning statements, and then I think 3 makes sense, you're at risk of just restating the prompt itself. So that's why it's so important to give those reasoning statements. I personally like the although and then because format that we've been using, but again, there's no, as you can tell from the rubric, there's no direct direction for you to do that. It just seems to make sense to me. So that is part 1, your intro paragraph. Now here's where most of the changes lie to the rubric, and that is in the evidence portion. So I want to talk about 3 specific things that I think are important to consider when looking at this rubric and to use it when you are writing your actual essay come Friday. The first is that you have to earn all 3 points. If you want to earn all 3 points for evidence from the document themselves, not only do you have to include 4 documents of the 5, which I think is fairly easy, but you have to link your evidence that's beyond the document. You have to link your evidence in the document to beyond the document and to your reasoning statement. You have to connect it to the argument. That part is the tricky part. So make sure that you're thinking of those things when you're writing. You'll notice the green boxes, the changes to the rubric, I don't think are that important other than just the numbers of documents you have to use. So the content here is not different. It is just the number of times you have to do it that's different. I want to bring special attention over to the blue box on the left. And I want you to look at this again and tell me, at no point does it tell you how many paragraphs you have to write. There's a lot of things going on online and from other classes saying, oh no, you have to write 2 body paragraphs. Where does it say that? Where does it say you have to write 3 body paragraphs? It doesn't. But 2 doesn't seem enough to me. When looking at this list and all that you have to do and all the reasons you have to give and the arguments you have to make, does 2 really make sense? And again, I go back to the statement that more is more. The format, as I say here, is not as important as is the content. 3 reasoning statements provides a lot of content and a lot of opportunity for information, both beyond the document and inside of it. That's why it just makes sense to me, but it is not required. It is not required. Lastly, the other question, it asks, or it tells you down here in the evidence beyond the document that you only need to get these 2 points, 2 pieces of historical evidence from beyond the document to get the full points. And while I believe that is technically correct, My concern lies in this explanation on the right here, where it says to earn this point, the response must describe the evidence and must use more than a phrase or reference. More than a phrase or reference scares me a little bit, because if you're only using two pieces of outside evidence and you get something wrong, or the reader believes that this is just a phrase or a reference, that's not going to be enough to get those points. So again, more is more. In this case, I think you need to add as much as you possibly can within reason to make sure they're not just phrases and references, but also to strengthen your argument and to demonstrate to them that you have a broad understanding of the prompt and the historical situation that you're discussing. So while technically you only need two pieces of outside evidence, again, when you look at everything on this rubric, it just doesn't seem like it's enough. So I would try to go for 2 per body paragraph, or 5 in total, if you will. But just 2 does not seem enough. We now move on to the analysis and reasoning portion, and this is where a lot of questions about capping the documents have come up. One of the things that students have brought to my attention is this idea that you only have to either talk about the context, the purpose, the point of view, and the audience. You have to just choose one of those. But one of the things I'd like to bring to your attention is the and or. To me, because of the comma before it, that tells me that they're not quite sure whether you have to do all of these or just one of them. My argument is all of them. How can you just talk about a point of view without also giving who the audience would be or the purpose of it would be? I also think that this is not very hard to do. So why not attempt to do all of it? Again, the CAP process is something we've been practicing all throughout the year, and I think it just lends itself to doing within a document, especially since you only have to do 2 of them. The other thing that worries me about just picking a single of the CAP steps is this word sourcing that they have over here in this green box to the left. Sourcing means capping to me. How can you completely source a document by just doing one of those things? It just doesn't seem like that is enough to get that point. The College Board is famous for saying one thing and not elaborating enough. And I think this is one instance where they're not elaborating enough as to what they want. And I think College Board readers are going to look at these 2 documents that you have to cap and feel that more is needed than just discussing an audience for 2 of the documents. So again, my suggestion is to do the entire process, contextualize, talk about the audience of the document, the point of view, and the purpose of the author of the document. Now we're on to the last part of the analysis and reasoning section, and that brings us to this idea of complex understanding of history. I want to just bring your attention to the fact that this is not different than a normal LEQ or DBQ, but I also want to bring your attention to this bottom portion where it talks about that this can't merely be a phrase or a reference. And when you're looking at everything that's asking you to do, to modify, refute, or connect it to another period, and to tie it to the argument, not just the evidence, but the argument. How and why would you do that at the end of an essay? I do not know. That's why I know in some videos it talks about doing this as a conclusion. I think in this sense, in a DBQ where there are these documents that you have to source, it just doesn't make sense. That's why I suggest doing it at the end of each of your body paragraphs. It just seems to have more of a flow to it, and it seems to follow the logic of the argument. So that's why you'll notice in the sample that I wrote and in the sort of the breakdown that I created and shared with you that's on Schoology in the Drive, I suggest doing it 3 times and doing it in each one of your body paragraphs. I just think it makes sense. And again, more is more. And in this case, I think qualifying, refuting, modifying, and connecting, do that 3 times. You have all your bases covered. So that's my suggestion. So there you have it. That's it. That's my opinion. Now, there are others out there on the internet and these different videos and the rest, but that's what just makes sense to me. I hope it makes sense to you. Again, don't get caught up on format. Get caught up on content. I think the capping method is a great way to earn points quickly and easily, and he agrees. So how can you argue against that? All right, keep those questions coming. I'll be real eager to respond to any that you do. Remember to check back Tomorrow we're going to have a Zoom meeting at 1, and then another one on Thursday where I'm going to share the most juiciest, perfect pieces of information that will take your confidence level from like Rutherford B. Hayes all the way up to Lincoln. Okay, so remember that. Check back tomorrow, and until then, stay safe, stay healthy, stay smart, stay smiling, and I will see you tomorrow.